So now let's continue our discussion about running records and anecdotal notes. This is part 2. Another thing that we talked about earlier about being very objective in our observations. And another thing that we want to do is always focus on the strengths of a child. Oftentimes we get caught up in what a child cannot do. For example, you might be concerned because a toddler, almost 2-year-old is not walking at the time when you would have expected them to walk. And even though these things could provide red flags for us, this information in and of itself is not very useful for planning curriculum or planning what to do next for that child. It doesn't really provide you with an understanding of where she is developmentally so that you can plan some appropriate experiences for her. So let's take that child who's not walking as an example. Let's say you observe the child and you note that, they're not walking yet. So then you must ask yourself, what does the child do? Does she crawl? How does she use her legs? Does she pull herself up? Does she let go of the table or the couch once she does pull herself up? You need to know where she is in that walking process, and that's focusing on her strengths because she's doing something to move towards walking. Maybe she pulls herself up but doesn't let go. Does she appear to be afraid? What tells you that she's afraid? Or are the adults around her acting afraid? Do they run to catch her when she tries to pull herself up and let go? So then let's say that you know she can pull herself up, but she doesn't let go yet. So is there a way, based on your observation, knowing that she can do those two things, is there a way that you can entice her to let go and kind of try to get that balance going that she's going to need to take a step? Maybe you could put a toy of hers just that she likes really well just outside her reach. Or maybe she's a very social child and she'll try to get to you if you just sit a little bit out of her way. So all of these questions are seeking to understand her strengths and what she can do. And you always want to start with the strengths and build on those. So now let's talk about the two specific kind of observation tools that we're going to learn about today. They are the anecdotal note and the running record. Anecdotal notes are directly observed incidences that are written in short, concise, and non-judgmental narrative. And in our last video, when we looked at those, analyzing some notes about being objective or subjective, those are some good examples of anecdotal notes. And here is another one that Maria, while sitting on the floor in the art area peeling the wrappers off the crayons, Maria looked up as the caregiver drew near. She said, "I'm making the crayons all naked." So that's a brief description of what a child is doing. It's very objective. It gives you detail, even saying what the child said. A running record is very different from an anecdotal note. A running record is a continuous observation of behavior for a particular period of time, and it's usually a longer period of time. These are also should be written in a non-judgmental narrative, but you're recording everything a child says or does during that period of time. So a running record is a much longer observational note. So let's look a little more closely at an example of a running record. So you can see that this takes place over at about a 10-minute time. Maggie enters the classroom standing behind her mother. She's peeking around her mother's leg with one eye. Her mother takes her by the hand and guides her into the classroom in front of her. Mother turns and leaves quietly, and Maggie stands motionless with her eyes cast downward. Anne greets Maggie with, "Good morning, Maggie," and reaches out to grasp her hands, and Maggie's body stiffens. She pulls away from Anne's embrace, and Anne releases her hands. Maggie goes to the cubby on the outskirts of the classroom. She doesn't make eye contact with the other arriving children. She looks down at the floor. She puts her lunch away and walks over to the group area. She sits on the rug circle and looks at her hands until the rest of the children are gathered. She does not respond to the other children's activity as they come to the circle. Maggie looks up as the teacher begins to speak. She sits at the circle motionless and silent while the teacher talks to the children about the day's activity. The teacher asks, "Who wants to play with blocks?" and Maggie does not volunteer. As the teacher asks the same question about various activities, Maggie does not respond. The other children leave the circle one by one, until Maggie is the only one left. "Would you like to work with Luciano in the puzzles?" the teacher asks. "Yes, I don't want to," Maggie replies in a barely audible voice. She gets up, walks to the small toy area, chooses a lotto game, spreads the cards out on the table, and sits down with her back to the center of the classroom. She looks closely at each picture card for a second or two before putting it in place. She completes all 12 matches on 2 cardboard sheets. Anne asks, "How many ducks are there?" and points to a card. Maggie answers 2 without hesitation. She holds up her hand with her middle, ring, and pinky fingers bent down. So you can see that this is a pretty detailed observation. A running record is one of the most thorough observation tools that we use. It's best used when teachers want to gain a comprehensive understanding of what's happening and why it's happening. To complete the record, the early care professional should sit and observe and writing down everything that you see and hear. It's not easy to do. You have to learn to write fast. So you want to make sure you include what language are the child or children using, what's their body position, what are the other children doing around them, what are some of the routines, what are the materials, and the child's position in the classroom. So you really want to just jot down everything that you see. Because as a teacher you're devoted to documenting a large amount of information over an extended period of time, it's really important if you're doing a running record to have adequate support for the other children during this time. Now, I've had a lot of students ask me, like, okay, who's ever going to have time to really do a running record in their classroom? And, it is going to be really hard for a teacher to do this. But I will tell you that as a supervisor of classrooms, I had a lot of teachers who would come to me and say, could you come down and observe Frankie? His behavior has been a little bit, out of sorts, and we don't know what's going on. And so in those kind of situations where I didn't know what to look for or any specifics about what was going on, I would use the running record because it allowed me to gather lots of different kinds of observational information to look at with the teachers and to try to determine what was going on. So it is kind of one of those tools that you want to keep in your toolbox as a teacher. To complete a running record, you will just have a blank sheet of paper, and we're going to take a look at the running record form that we will be completing for our portfolios. So you can see here that you always want to include the date that you're doing the observation, the child's name, the child's age, an area of the classroom that you're observing in is important, and who the observer is. So this is the form that you're going to use when you're observing the child for your portfolio. If you're not observing a child in the classroom, just tell, what part of the home, maybe it's the kitchen or the living room, it doesn't matter. I did put a little bit of an example here in red, and this observation running record note is going to allow you to do 2 steps of your observation. It's going to allow you to, in this column, collect your information. So I just did a little brief snippet here that Maria enters the classroom. She walks to her cubby and removes her coat and backpack while watching the other children in the block area. She runs to the block area and watches J and D building. She asks them, "Can I play too?" So that's just a short snippet of what you would include. You would have much, much more. That's what would happen at 9 o'clock in the morning. So as you're doing your observation, you're filling in this section of the form. So next you would probably want to come down here and put in 9:15. Whoops, didn't use my shift key and I used it. 9:15, and then you would type in what happened at 9:15. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so I believe the directions say that you should observe a child for at least a half an hour to 45 minutes. And so all of your notes will be written in this column. If you're writing them by hand, that's fine. I really don't mind that. I just have to be able to read them. But you'll want to print out a couple of, copy and paste this table into another page and print out a couple of copies, because you really should have, depending if you write fairly small, not teeny tiny, but you probably fill up about 5 pages using this observation form. So you want to just write everything you see, everything you hear, and you always write it in present tense because it's happening as you observe it. So you want to kind of document the time frame too. Don't go too far in the time frame. Every 10 or 15 minutes, note the time there, and you should have a lot of notes under that short amount of time. The advantage of this method is really the detail that it provides for you as a teacher. All classroom influences and unexpected occurrences can be noted during your observational record. And a running record really gives you the big picture. But as I said before, it can be time consuming. So I guess that's one of the downsides. It can also give you some useless information because it's more of a broad focus. It may not be feasible to complete a running record if you have an active group of children, unless another adult can be with the children while you're doing that observation. But as I said, I have actually used this quite often when I do observations, and I'm going in because I want the big picture, the broad picture of what's going on in a child's day. As part of our assignment for our portfolio, we will also do the second step of the observation process, which is doing some analysis of our record. So here you can see that I've done a little short analysis of just this little blurb here that probably took 5 minutes. So actually, really, this should be 05 because this is just kind of a 5-minute occurrence. But what I noted is in the developmental area of self-help, Maria understands the morning routine, right? She's able to take care of her coat and her backpack without any help. And then I also noted that socially, Maria understands that asking a question can allow her to enter a play activity that's already begun. So here I am, that very short snippet of 5 minutes, I'm able to analyze a lot about Maria and what she is able to do. So that is the basics of a running record. Now let's go back to our PowerPoint slide show. What our next slide is going to be a video. And let me get it over there and get it started. You can see that this is a video of a classroom, and there's a little boy, Connor, and what I would like you to do is try to write everything that you see and hear using a running record form. So what you can do is open that running record form on and then kind of shrink down your pages here so that you can watch the video and type at the same time. So I'm going to run the video, and I would like you to practice taking a running record. Okay, so hopefully you were able to capture a lot of the details. I'm going to ask you to take a snippet of what you've written, just maybe a paragraph or two of what you've written now, and enter it into our question here on the PowerPoint. Okay, thanks for doing that. Now what we're going to do is for your discussion board, we're actually going to do another running record. What I'd like you to do is go to our Blackboard site, and let me pull it up so I can show you. And in Blackboard, we've got this video here, and your discussion board is asking you to watch this video and create a running record. And so I would like you to do that now. Watch that video, create a running record and post it under our second discussion board. And then I will see you back here for part 3.